The IBM 705.
International Business Machines, or IBM, was once America's tech leader. Over time, it came to be viewed as more of a dinosaur. Bill Timme had just turned 61. He became an apparent casualty of a corporate program aimed at transforming the workforce.
He said, well, Bill, this is not a call I really wanted to make.
What did you think when he said that?
I go, okay, this is not going well.
This week, a look at allegations of age discrimination and new-collar workers.
In the dusty fields of Midland, Texas, you can't always let the picturesque scenes fool you. When we were here in 2018, the oil boom was in full swing, and some were striking it rich.
You know, you ain't gonna have a high school diploma or anything. No.
This week, we're back to see the oil boom gone bust, and why.
And North Korea is back, firing ballistic missiles, testing a new administration. But there's a change coming in America's strategic missile defense because the old one wasn't working.
The flight tests that have been conducted, no more than half have hit the target.
A surprising update to our reporting on missiles that miss. Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Today, more older people are staying in the labor force working longer than they ever have before, partly because they're physically able to, partly because they have to for financial reasons. At the same time, some employers are trying to push them out. Today, we examine how that dynamic is playing out at tech giant IBM, which is accused of a mass undertaking to replace thousands of older employees with what executives called new-collar workers. Bill Timme retired from the Navy as a Rear Admiral and went on to a second career at IBM, where he became the global defense and intelligence leader. He worked happily and successfully there for almost 10 years until a call from his boss in January 2017.
He said, well, Bill, this is not a call I really wanted to make.
What did you think when he said that?
I go, okay, this is not going well.
Was that out of the blue?
Completely out of the blue. And so my boss, who said, you know, you'll get an email shortly saying that you're going to be laid off.
Timme had just turned 61. He became an apparent casualty of a corporate program aimed at transforming the workforce.
The IBM 705, almost 30,000 words on punched cards have been electronically transferred to 2 reels of tape.
International Business Machines, or IBM, was once America's tech leader. The company revolutionized the computer punched card and later the personal computer, or PC. It was the Microsoft of yesteryear. Over time, it came to be viewed as more of a dinosaur.
IBM in recent years has been competing with a new brand of younger, hipper tech companies like Google, like Amazon, and IBM has recognized that it's got a reputation for being an older tech company.
Attorney Shannon Liss Reardon represents more than 500 former IBM employees.
A strategy that IBM has been undertaking for a number of years now is to try to systematically reduce the age of its workforce by getting rid of older employees, many of whom have been with the company for decades, and replacing them with younger employees.
Workers age 40 and over have been a protected class since the Age Discrimination in Employment Act was passed in 1967. But some argue age discrimination remains widely practiced and accepted in the workplace today and is notoriously difficult to prove. At IBM, critics say they found an undeniable pattern. In 2018, the journalism group ProPublica reported that IBM fired more than 20,000 employees over age 40 over a 6-year period.
We've also uncovered a number of IBM strategic planning documents in which they expressly talk about the need to refresh their workforce, rebalance their workforce, focus on what they call early professional hires.
A reported internal IBM strategic planning document submitted as evidence in court refers to reprofiling current talent. Under continuous talent refresh, it reads, focus on programs to create room for new talent to build skills for key growth areas. Under expected outcomes, 55% early professional hires in 2020 and 10% annual talent refresh. Former top IBM executive Catherine Rogers says that's code for replacing older workers with young ones. Her testimony is a key part of the case against IBM. She was fired in 2017 after 40 years, she says, for warning her superiors that their hiring and firing strategies amounted to age discrimination. IBM's stated goal was to hire 25,000 people over 4 years, but doing so without expanding the workforce, Rogers alleges, implied a parallel plan to reduce 25,000 older workers. She says IBM CEO at the time even coined the phrase new-collar workers.
So there's a big focus for a number of years at IBM about bringing in these so-called new-collar workers. But in order to bring in 25,000 of these workers, they needed to make space for them. And the way they did that was through a number of strategies to reduce their employment of older people.
Nobody from IBM would agree to an interview. A spokesman told us, our employment actions always have been based on having the right skills at the right levels in the right jobs, never on the age of any individual or group of employees.
Is age discrimination something that's hard to prove?
Oh, it's very hard to prove.
Richard Johnson heads up the program on retirement policy at the Urban Institute, a research nonprofit.
I think the way I would define age discrimination is if you're treating someone differently on account of their age, when it doesn't reflect their productivity, the contributions that they can make in the workplace.
A business might say these happen to be older workers because of the stage of their career that they're at, but they're also more expensive workers, and we feel like in some ways perhaps less productive in the aggressive ways we want someone to be for their career. So it's not because they're older, it's just because of what they cost the company and how we see them as an employee. Isn't that a fair way to look at things for some employers?
And that's certainly what employers claim. In terms of the higher costs, though, what we do find is that a lot of older workers are willing to work for less, that they don't really expect that they're going to get paid as much as they did at the peak of their earnings career. We know that sort of after age 50, after age 55, earnings actually tend to fall for older workers. And yet, they can't even be hired at those lower wages.
According to the Urban Institute, someone 65 or older is 95% more likely to be working today than they were 35 years ago. But on the flip side, a study of retirement trends from 1998 to 2014 found more than half of people working full-time in their early 50s were pushed out of their jobs before they reached age 65. The complaints against IBM got a boost last fall when the federal body overseeing such claims, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, rejected IBM's arguments. The commission found nearly 86% of IBM's potential layoff pool was older workers, and the evidence showed there is reasonable cause to believe that IBM discriminated against the employees on account of their age. In response, IBM told us, we were disappointed by the commission's preliminary findings. IBM makes decisions based on skills and the needs of its business units, not age. Meantime, the way IBM handled the layoffs or separations has further complicated attempts to sue. In order to get a month or so of severance pay, most of the employees, like Timmy, signed an agreement saying they'd have to pursue any age discrimination claims through arbitration, rather than banding together in one powerful global lawsuit.
So by focusing on each individual separation individually, IBM is trying to avoid having anyone take a look at the big picture.
Timmy has joined the class action suit Liz Reardon is trying to build with hundreds of ex-IBM employees. Today, he's 65 and doing some consulting, but isn't working full-time, even though he says he has plenty of gas left in the tank.
Do you feel like you have more good working years left in you, or are you going to call it a day?
Oh, I've definitely got more working time.
The former employees hope to receive an eventual payout from IBM. Advocates are pressing Congress to step in and ban forced arbitration that prevents workers from banding together to enforce their rights in court. Ahead on Full Measure, we head back to oil-rich Midland, Texas, to see how they're dealing with the oil price bust. When a stuck ship recently blocked the Suez Canal, a vital trade route, oil prices went up. But that was temporary. Overall, America's oil industry is still grappling with the bust in oil prices prompted by the pandemic shutdowns. During America's oil boom not long ago, Scott Thuman reported on good times in Midland, Texas. Now he returns to find it hard hit.
In the dusty fields of Midland, Texas, folks are aware you can't always let the picturesque scenes fool you. This massive chunk of land sitting on top of fortunes in oil and gas has at times made or broken dreams. When we were here in 2018, it was making them. The oil boom was in full swing. They couldn't build houses fast enough, and even a local barber was making over $180,000. The bars were full, and oil workers came from all over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, you ain't got to have a high school diploma or anything. No. You just know how to have a good work ethic, that's about it. And sometimes you ain't even got to have that as long as you show up on time every day. Yeah.
But when COVID hit, people stopped driving, stopped flying. They just sat. So did pump jacks. Oil prices did worse. They plummeted because they ran out of room to store it all, just as other countries started a price war. And where these Texans once made room to keep up with their sudden growth spurt, the dust is still settling. That was almost 2 years ago. Today, still an empty lot and a part of the city's multi-million-dollar revitalization plan put on hold. David Blackman is the managing editor of Shale magazine. What did that mean for jobs around here?
A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of companies went bankrupt. We had 100 bankruptcies in the industry last year. That, of course, means layoffs. Companies like Halliburton and Schlumberger, the big service companies, the drilling companies, had to deactivate 80% of their drilling rigs. And every one of those drilling rigs has a crew 50, 60 people that suddenly weren't working. They had to lay off. So there were something over 100,000 layoffs in the industry last year just because of COVID. I mean, you could really attribute that to COVID-19 impacts.
Like Joseph Kiowski, now out of the oil business altogether. Did you have any idea that you were going to lose your job?
No, not at all. We kind of hit the ground running, and it was looking pretty fun and pretty fantastic.
Making a lot of money?
Yes, we were. But at the same time, it's kind of like, borrowed, if that makes sense, because, okay, we know that there's going to be a downturn, so kind of bide your time and, put it back if you can, which most people here, they don't. So that's kind of the nature of the beast. You have to really try and, plan for the future, I guess.
Which at the moment is uncertain. Now that demand is increasing again, oil prices have rebounded back to where they were before the pandemic hit. Still, Blackman worries about the aftershocks of 2020.
I don't think we're going to get back to the full boom that we were in 2018, 2019. But for example, the rig count is gone up, almost doubled since last September. It's still just half of what it was a year ago, though.
But folks here will tell you life in West Texas is all about resilience. Overall, happy, content, optimistic, concerned? What are we?
Optimistic.
Yeah. Optimistic.
Hey, if things are looking up, everybody's happy. I think a happy medium is honestly $65 to $85 a barrel, and then everyone can make some money, have jobs.
And renewed hope that what lies beneath will bring them back again. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman in Midland, Texas.
While oil prices have rebounded some, the other big factor that will determine how strongly the oil-producing parts of America will come back is the Biden administration. President Biden is putting his focus on renewable energy like solar and wind, but experts say major energy companies are still evaluating how that will affect their industry. Coming up on Full Measure, the Pentagon X's Boeing from a massive new missile defense project. An update on our reporting on the troubled and expensive defense system Boeing was developing to protect the U.S. from foreign missile strikes. A timely topic with North Korea recently firing 2 ballistic missiles in what some see as a message to the Biden administration. It was during the Trump administration that a series of missile launches by North Korea's dictatorship heightened tension and led to an unprecedented meeting between President Trump and North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. Concern about a possible long-range ballistic missile strike emphasized the importance of the U.S. having a way to protect its coastline. But there's been a persistent problem. The Pentagon's choice of a missile defense shield didn't work very well, as we reported previously on Full Measure. For the last 14 years, the Pentagon and Boeing have been testing a defense system designed to shoot down nuclear missiles fired at the U.S. from enemies like Iran and North Korea. But it turns out the interceptors failed to destroy their targets in 6 out of 11 tests, all while Boeing got an incredible amount of tax dollars and bonuses. We recently spoke to David Willman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter at the LA Times, who investigated the story. What was in the information that should give the public pause?
The best available evidence is that the system is not reliable, cannot be depended on. And in fact, in the flight tests that have been conducted, no more than half have hit the target. And these are meticulously scripted for success flight tests. So it's a system that the taxpayers of the United States have paid in excess of $40 billion for that is nowhere near being reliable.
Explain how the bonuses worked. Obviously, the contractor wants the system to work, but if they can make it look like it's working better than it is, they get financial rewards.
The system is all about hitting an enemy missile, and yet the criterion for success has been much more broadly defined.
The criterion for them getting bonuses or financial incentives has been loosened, in other words?
Yes.
These are test missiles, but what are they shooting at for the tests?
They're shooting at rockets that are typically launched from the Marshall Islands, from Kwajalein. They go up over the Pacific, we hope empty Pacific, but they soar up out of Earth's atmosphere.
Ignition. We have liftoff.
Our interceptor would be typically fired from Vandenberg and would get up into space, 3-stage rocket. The final stage is called a kill vehicle. And by that time, it's flying 4 miles per second. And it's doing what it can to hit that enemy missile, that mock warhead, in space at those speeds. It's a tremendously difficult thing to do.
Now, in a surprise move, the Pentagon has removed Boeing from the running to create a new missile defense system. Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman are left competing in the new effort, estimated to cost $12 billion tax dollars. As for 2 missile sites developed by Boeing in California and Alaska, the Pentagon says it's revamping the silos. The cost of the Boeing-led project is estimated to be over $50 billion. Boeing said it's disappointed by the decision to be removed from consideration for the new one. Next on Full Measure, the Internet of Things and the security risks it poses. The internet, of course, isn't just on our phones and computers anymore. It's a constant presence in almost everything around us, but it may come with threats to our security. Josie Sturman spoke to Laura DeNardis, author of the book, The Internet in Everything, which starts out by posing the question, what would happen if humans suddenly left the Earth?
You'd still have robots moving merchandise around an Amazon fulfillment center. You would have home thermometers changing the climate in a home. Bitcoin would still be mined. Russian social media bots would still be spreading propaganda. And so what that does is it tells us that the internet and the physical world are now intertwined. You can't really distinguish between the virtual sphere and the physical sphere anymore.
Some of our viewers may never have heard this term, the Internet of Things. How do you sum this up in the simplest definition?
So it used to be that we would enter the internet through a screen. And now objects that are also just in the physical world, whether it's a soccer ball, or whether it is a car, or whether it's a medical device in telemedicine, these are things that are also connected to the internet.
What do you see as the potential dangers or pitfalls of that?
It affects everything from security to privacy to the economy to what it means to do national security. It used to be said many times in national security spheres that no bullets could be fired in cyberspace. But that's really not true anymore, because you could potentially assassinate someone through the internet if they had a cardiac appliance, or you could take down a critical industrial infrastructure without physically being there.
How do you think the U.S. rates in terms of cybersecurity and protecting the Internet of Things?
We've seen some discussions on the floor of the House around the Internet of Things, so I think that policymakers are aware of the threat. But now especially everyone understands the importance of innovations like telemedicine and the need to work from home, and that will help to draw attention to the consequences of this and have greater action.
Is it serious enough that you think the Internet of Things actually threatens our democracy?
I think in general, technology brings us closer to democracy because it empowers people, and that the benefits of the cyber-physical world far outweigh the problems with it. And it's exactly because of how important it is and how consequential the innovations are that we have to get the question of security and privacy right.
Do you have any concerns at all that you would say to people, we should disconnect, we should unplug and stop interconnecting all of these devices? Or you feel like it's fixable?
I'm an engineer at heart, and I love technology, and I'm a big user of technology, and I think that it has promise for every area of society, and I would never give someone the dystopian message to unplug. I think we have to understand as humans that we're technological beings, but we have to get this question right about security.
For Full Measure, I'm Josie Sturman.
Coming up next week on Full Measure, when it comes to America's water wars, the West is as wild as it ever was, and the mighty Colorado River is one of the spoils.
I think the price of water is going to become sky high. It's going to be just like as if you were buying gold or silver or copper.
We investigate the water wars next week on Full Measure. Until next week, thanks for watching. We'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable.